I was like, why does this feel so familiar? And then I remembered that basically I invented double knitting. Hello! Welcome to episode 9 of my knitting podcast. My name is Becky, and congratulations, you have found a spare moment in the day that is entirely for yourself. And thank you so much for choosing to spend it with me. I have a few things that I'm going to show you today. We're going to start with a finished object. It is my Alex hood, which I was nearly done with last episode. It is a pattern by, I believe, it's from Knitting for Olive, or it's published by Knitting for Olive, and there is actually a designer name, and I will put that up on screen. I made it out of Zakami yarn, which is this, as you can tell, kind of fade set. So it starts with this like pink, which is where I knit it from around this sort of scarfy bit, and then went all the way up to this kind of like intermediary grey here, and then it ends with this like dark bit up at the top. I thought it would be a really fun twist on the kind of hoods and balaclavas that I've seen a lot of. Low-key, I kind of hate this. I've been wearing it a lot. It is extremely practical as far as garments go, like more than I thought it would be. And I have this winter coat that doesn't have a hood at all. It's just been absolutely bucketing it down in the UK. So it's useful to have a bit of a hood. The other day it was proper raining and my partner was like, oh, make sure that you're equipped for the rain that's going to happen. You know, get an umbrella, make sure you wear a raincoat. And I was like, yeah, I will. And then there was me just like putting on a little knitted hood, calling it a day. You can obviously wrap this round and it has this kind of like cowl effect / just warm scarf, but then has the hood that you can pop up at a moment's notice. It's giving very fantasy character to me. That day that I walked out with this hood and called it rain protection, I had this big winter coat on, and I also had this like tiny little sort of, not satchel, tiny little like pouch bag. And honestly, I was looking at myself and I was like, I look like I'm taking the ring to Mordor. So it's a bit of a vibe. It's certainly a type of look. And as I say, I have been wearing this a lot, but there are a few things about it which are my decisions that I'm annoyed at myself for. I'll take this off and show you. The first slightly annoying decision that I made was when I looked at the meterage required to make this pattern and then the yarn that I'd chosen, I thought I wasn't going to have enough with all 3 skeins in order to make this. So I modified it slightly by just shortening this scarfy bit, and that was just by doing increases more regularly than the pattern asked for. So this is not quite as long as you might expect, and I did that just thinking like that will work nicely in terms of I'll have enough to get to the end of the hood. But as you can tell, I was way off because I only really introduced this black quite late on in the game, and I knew I would have to introduce the black, like I couldn't just finish it with the grey. But it wasn't quite as like seamless as I'd hoped, and I really wanted most of the hood to be a lot darker and in that black. I've actually got a lot of the black just left over, which is less than ideal. The other thing, if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't increased this as regularly as I did, the other thing that would have happened is that I wouldn't have had this like kind of strange jump. So the way that it's constructed is that you do these like long scarfy bits and then join them in the middle, and then you pick up stitches for the hood along the edge of the seamed up scarves. So I was knitting both scarves together and then knew I would have to bring in the grey, but it's just not as like pretty as it could have been if I'd used more of the pink before I got to this point, and if I'd planned it out a little bit better. I think in terms of the project, I'd have known that you were picking up with the next skein. So in terms of like planning out the fade, it could have been almost perfect. And that's what's frustrating about it, is that it's not bad, but it just could have been slightly more perfect had I managed to get that sort of timing right in terms of when the second skein came in. And even if I'd chosen to stop the pink before it was run out so that I could have that quite natural, beautiful fade, that would have been so satisfying. The other part about that, obviously, is what I just said about the black not being used as much as I would have liked. And I did this kind of like gradual fade in because I didn't want it to be quite so much of a jump as it is here. And that just looks, I don't like that so much. I don't like that so much at all. You can only really tell that when I'm holding it up or showing it as a full thing. Like, you can't really tell when I'm actually wearing it. But yeah, two slightly annoying bits. Like, it could have been almost perfect, I think. But regardless, I really like the yarn. I really like the pattern. I kind of want to make another one, but I think having like 2 or 3 hoods in your wardrobe is probably overkill, potentially overkill. And also, if I'm going to make another one, what I've been really enjoying is seeing people wearing these like lovely mohairy, bright pop color balaclava hood things, like a bright cobalt blue or a bright red. I think that would be the next. I'd rather make that than another one of these. I'm not like a big pattern repeater, actually, when I think about it. I don't think there's been any patterns that I have actively made twice on purpose and had 2 garments out of. I might come back to that. I might be wrong about that. But yeah, I don't think there's any that I've done twice exactly the same. One that I do really want to make again is the Curious Crop, which is a pattern by Lydia Morrow, and I've worn it on this channel before, but it has like a cut-out hole in the middle, and she has a version that doesn't have a hole in it, and that's been on my mind for quite a long time to make a non-holy version, because the general fit of that as a tank top is honestly perfect. I can't fault it. Like, I think she's very well known for being great at fitting like multiple types of body, and just the way that she writes her patterns seems to fit me like a glove. I don't know why. Well, I don't know why. It's expertise and talent and planning and skill. All of those things. So anyway, yeah, that's my finished object segment of episode 9. I want to briefly talk about Lannarch sweater, which obviously I mentioned in my last episode, but that's obviously what I'm wearing. I haven't worn it on a podcast episode before, so I thought I would treat you guys to the kind of full view, and I'm going to do my like little awkward crouch so that you can see that. Review, I guess, a few weeks into owning it and to having it and to wearing it all the time. Still love it. There's a couple of things that are on my mind that I would do differently if I was doing this again. And the first thing is that I probably wouldn't have this like plastic zip. There's a part of me that's like, I've kind of finished this beautiful, magnificent piece with something that feels a little bit cheap, and it just happened to be a zip that I had lying around rather than one that I'd specifically chosen. That is quite like an easy change out. It's just getting yourself into the headspace of doing that, knowing that you're going to be sitting down for like 3 hours to replace a zip, which functions perfectly fine. Like, obviously I can move it up and down and whatever, but it's just not seamless and satisfying. It doesn't have a good, like, what's the zip equivalent of mouthfeel? Whatever that is. It doesn't have a good zip feel. And I just want to feel really happy as I'm doing it. One other thing that is slightly annoying about this is that I have to keep like kind of turning down the collar, and it's quite like a fat collar, and I pretty much always wear it like this, where it's got like a little bit of a quarter zip up and then this is flat down. I don't think I ever wear it like popped, but it does kind of naturally ride up a little bit. And there's what I'm a little bit tempted to do is to put like a little loop to sew the back edge of the collar to itself. Nothing too like, not stitching the whole thing down, but just something that might secure it in place a little bit so that it doesn't do this riding up thing. It seems to be okay for now, but you're all on like collar watch to tell me if it starts riding up and getting a bit annoying. Other than that, reviews a few weeks into Lannarch remain outstanding. It's one of my favourite things I think that I've ever made. If I could make a note to friends and family watching in real life, it's that I haven't received nearly enough compliments about this. And I'm choosing to believe that that's because it looks so good that it's like, it kind of looks shop bought. And I hate that as a compliment. I think a lot of shop bought knitting looks terrible. But I'm choosing to believe that this looks so professional that nobody could ever believe that you need to compliment me on how wonderful and handmade it is. But let me tell you, I would like to receive compliments on all my outfits, all the time, regardless of whether I've made them. And it's just something to note. Thank you in advance. Let's get on to works in progress. I have a new cast on, so I'm going to start with that. It is, what could it be? Oh my god. Yes, of course. It is a sock. Obviously, this is the first one. It is the Denim Dip Sock by Jessie Maed. I bought this pattern maybe like a year ago when I went to Austria for a weekend, and I was like sitting about to cast it on and then saw it was a Judy's Magic cast on, which you need 3 needles for, and I had only brought like a tiny fixed circular, so I couldn't actually do it. Or maybe I could have done, but I couldn't be bothered thinking about how I would have done it. And so therefore I cast on the Lufticus socks by Chatty that I knit last year instead, which also were really good. But this sock is a similar sort of shape in that it's going to be a little kind of shorty sock, so it's only going to really come up to the ankle. I'm really outing myself as like a proper millennial, am I, by only knitting ankle socks. But I don't think Gen Z, when they were making their fashion choices, thought about how long it would take to knit a proper calf length sock. Just something that they haven't really considered. And I like my ankle socks. I don't like having too much going on up to the leg. They just roll down, they get annoying. Anyway, this is, as I say, a similar sort of shape, so it will be a little like shorty boy. I am absolutely loving how it looks so far. The ones that are in the pattern photos are blue, and I think that's kind of why the name Denim Dip makes sense. But in a weird way, I'm like, this kind of does look like denim, like green dyed denim. It also really looks like a snake, doesn't it? Which I'm loving. This yarn is from Indie Yarn Club. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I bought like a mystery box with 3 skeins of sock wool in it. And one of the skeins was this like bright pink that I used for my Rumble Raglan. Another one was the beautiful variegated purple that I used for my Ode to Barbara socks last year. And then this gorgeous Shreky green is the third in that box. So each one of them has been very successful in terms of making something that I love. I also think this is like the perfect amount of speckle for the pattern. So it's got these little pops of like darker dyed green, but it's obviously mostly pretty solid. And that means that the lace is coming out, I think, really nicely, but it's also got a little bit of like visual interest from these pops of colour. And then on the back, you can see, I think it looks quite fun as well, even just in the stocking stitch. So loving how that is coming out. This is obviously a bit of like a healing and spiritual experience for me to be knitting a sock, because last year with the colourwork sock that I was knitting for my dad for like 6 months, and which is still not done. I don't think I've said this explicitly on the podcast because I honestly got bored of talking about this sock, but I knit it for a second time, and for a second time I couldn't get it over my ankle. So I've just left it for a little bit. It's actually one of the projects that is on my chest of drawers if you've been watching my like whip clear out series. So I've got that in my head as something that needs to be tackled at some point, but I'm not psychologically strong enough for it now. I need to go back to basics on how to do colourwork socks. I need to like take it beat by beat. I need to not just trust myself in this. I need to test it as I go. So making a non-colourwork sock as like a palette cleanser to remind myself that I don't hate socks. I like knitting socks. I just haven't quite figured out how to do the colourwork ones yet. But I will do. I really want to make a proper one this year, whether it ends up being like the one that I'm making for my dad, or whether I end up doing a different one for myself. Whatever I end up doing, I will crack the colourwork sock this year. But in the interim, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for these. I think they're going to be so good. There's just nothing better, I think, than having socks that are perfectly made for your feet as well. I can't describe it. I don't know why it's so good. One thing that I keep thinking about, just from a societal perspective, is the fact that we have to wear socks and shoes. And it just seems to me like every day when I do this, put on socks and put on shoes, or tights and shoes, I just think, why have we not optimized this? Why are we not more efficient? Like, why have we not collapsed these together? I don't know if anyone else thinks that, but I just think, like, as a society, this is a problem that we face every day. And why have we not surpassed it? Okay. Next work in progress is my Moss Path cardigan. So I'm going to really briefly talk about this. It looks the same as the last time, but I'm just showing you this as like a reminder. We've got one big sleeve, got body and ribbing down at the bottom, and I haven't done anything else on the second sleeve because I'm kind of waiting on that until I've done the button band. A lot of people gave really good tips about how to pick up stitches in my last episode, so I'm incredibly grateful for those, because one of the ones was like, you can use a crochet hook, and then somebody else also said you can use like a Tunisian crochet hook. Tunisian crochet is something that I have been very intrigued by for a long time. I went to a knit night like maybe 6 months ago, and one of the people who was at that knit night, it was more like a fibre night. There were people doing like crochet, needlework. I was obviously knitting, I think I was knitting this, I was knitting the Lannarch. And she was using a Tunisian crochet hook and making something, I can't remember exactly what she was making, but it looked beautiful. So very intriguing to me. In some ways, I think, and this is a very uninformed initial take, that Tunisian crochet kind of is the worst of both crochet and knitting in terms of process, not output. Because what I like about crochet is the fact that, like, if you mess up on one stitch, you don't have to pick up a bunch of stuff. You can just like find that stitch again, and you should hopefully be all good. And also, it's a little bit more like you kind of take it where you want to go, right? Like if you decide, oh, I want to increase by however much, it's a lot easier to just do that on the fly than it is with knitting, where I think sometimes you need to plan it out a little bit more in terms of where the stitches will fall. Again, like a very potentially uninformed initial take. And then also, if you're going to knit, like you can do that kind of mindlessly, whereas I find with crochet, I cannot crochet without looking at it. And I think that's one of the reasons why they can't automate crochet so easily, is because it's just not. You actually have to look where you're going, and you can go a bunch of different places, but you can't really, like with knitting, it's like fixed. So the chances of you not getting it into the right place is a lot lower. So to me, like, I'm intrigued by Tunisian crochet, but I'm not sure if I'm a convert. That was a whole tangent. The reason that I wanted to talk about Moss Path, even though I haven't actually made any progress on the main body of it, is that I've been learning about double knitting, which I thought I'd never done before. And I think, again, without really like coming at it properly, without really knowing too much about it, I think when you initially think of double knitting, I imagine most people think of like a piece that has maybe a design on one side, and then on the other side they have the design in reverse. So you kind of see sometimes these like squares of double knitting where somebody has done like maybe a heart or a simple design on one side, and then you flip it and it's the same design but the colours are reversed. That's what came to my mind initially when people talk about double knitting. And then, but I'm pretty sure I have done it in some way in the past. And actually, as I was doing it, I had this feeling of like, I was like, I've been to this place before. A weird sort of deja vu, where I was like, why does this feel so familiar? And then I remembered that basically I invented double knitting. Citation needed. A while ago, I was making a scarf, and the concept for this scarf was, as I'm sure people are sick of hearing about, I like to run. And when I did my first ever marathon, I thought something that might be quite like nice as a commemorative thing is to knit a scarf that reflected my training plan, which was a little bit based off of the concept of like a temperature scarf or a temperature blanket, where, you know, the temperature of a given day you then assign a colour to that range and then knit it up so that over the course of the year, or the course of however long, you can see the changing temperature. Some like fun twists that I've seen on this concept, just as a bit of an aside, is I saw somebody who had done that but for the hottest temperature in a given year in their country to reflect climate change, basically, and global warming. And that was a sort of level of horrifying. So they'd gone back to when records began in maybe the 50s or 60s, and then knit the hottest temperature every year up until this year. And obviously it's just getting like hotter and hotter and hotter. Scary, scary levels. And then another, so I say fun concept, but like, you know, a slightly different take on that idea. And then the other thing that I sometimes see people do is like, if over the course of a pregnancy, people make something like that as like a baby blanket. And that 100%, if I was in that circumstance, I'd be doing that. I think that's such a cute little memento that you can give to your newborn. Obviously, if it's going to be a baby blanket, I'm not going to be using like the finest quality yarn for that. But I think it would still be, I think it'd be like a really fun, cute thing to give. Where did I start this on? Yes, I was making my marathon temperature scarf, which ended up being actually really dull because I chose like this quite dark, like grey colour from Drops as the like base. So I didn't want this scarf to be like a full grey scarf with like random little pops of colour in it. And I kind of lost faith in that, lost enthusiasm for it because I found the training so hard, and I was like, I don't want to have another thing that I'm just doing on top of this where I have to knit like 4 rows for every day, even if I didn't train. So that ended up getting frogged. But the point is that I did like a kind of version of Judy's Magic cast on for that, and then was like, I'll basically knit it like a massive I-cord. So slipping stitches, slipping purl stitches, and knitting knit stitches exactly like you do in double knitting, and then going round in that way. And I was like, wow, I'm such a genius. I've just created this like amazing technique, not realizing it's just double knitting. And I spent ages like kind of figuring it out instead of just knowing how to do it. And I don't think I did it right. Like, it definitely didn't look as good as double knitting can look, which is a beautiful segue into me talking about the swatch that I was doing. Oh, actually, I'm kind of like halfway through. I'm just going to get to like a neat point while I talk about this. So thinking that I'd never done double knitting before, felt like I needed to do a swatch of double knitting before I got to the point where I could do this double knit band, button band. And this swatch that I'm just currently getting to like a neat place is actually the 3rd swatch that I had done. So people say that your double knitting tension is a lot looser than doing stocking stitch. So you should aim to go down a needle size. And I've been knitting this whole cardigan on 3.75s. So I went down to 3.5s, didn't get gauge. Went down to 3.25s, didn't get gauge. And now I'm knitting on 3mm needles with Aran weight yarn, which is tough. It is tough. But you can see this is my like original swatch for the cardigan. This is my double knit one. And you can see they're pretty much now bang on in terms of stitches. I'm really not sure about rows. That was the other thing, actually, is that I didn't realise, or I didn't think about it, but like you obviously need to cast on twice as many stitches as you do for a double knit because you're working it back and forth. And you also need to do twice as many rows because obviously every time you knit a row, you're only kind of really doing like half of it, like one side of it. So I'm a bit like, honestly, I'm a bit lost. I think it looks pretty close. It's close enough. And I don't think you're ever going to get, if you change needle size, even with the same yarn, even with the same knitter, I don't think you're ever going to get like a perfect linear reduction in terms of like your stitch and your row change for that new gauge, if that is at all in English. You know, you're going to have to just kind of get close enough and then hope that blocking takes you the rest of the way, I think. But just doing this like tiny little swatch, I am so excited for this button band. I think it's going to look absolutely mega. It's so like soft and it's very structured as well. I mean, it might just be structured because I'm doing this thick yarn on these tiny pins, but it just feels like, oh, yeah, it feels great. It feels so good. It's like I have like a personal problem and addiction with folded hem, which is obviously basically kind of the same thing in terms of actual effect. No, it's not. I'm going to take that back. It's kind of similar. It looks like just as good and it has the same sort of effect as double knit when you're using it in this way. But that also has that very like, I'm trying not to use words that are too suggestive, so I'll leave it there. But I think we all know what I mean in terms of the feeling. So that was like a rattle through my current works in progress. Only 2, which is very noble of me, really. I do tend to have like way more on the go. I'm very much discounting a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about in terms of like that, the like whip clear out series, because I don't really think of those actually, even though I'm calling them works in progress, I'm not even sure that I would call them, that I would think of them as like active works in progress. All of them are really like languishing works in progress, things I haven't looked at in ages, or things that didn't really go right, so that I'm trying to like recover them from the graveyard of previous failed makes and turn them into something worthwhile. So they're not really works in progress. These are my 2 active things that I'm knitting on. And we're kind of now going to go into like this sort of acquisitions section of the podcast. It's not a strict acquisition. And again, if you've been watching that series, you'll have seen this. But I want to talk about what I'm going to make with it. So I frogged a previous knit of mine, which was the Ripple Butt Shorts by Jessie May. I just don't know why I ever thought that I would wear knitted shorts. I honestly, when I tried them on, they were so obscene. And I'm not like, I don't know. Sometimes I do think I come across like a bit prudish in terms of how I dress, that I really like coverage but it's all about comfort, really. And I was like, this is not comfortable. I feel very self-conscious wearing them. There were also some other unfortunate design features that created certain illusions in certain areas. And again, I will leave that up to your imagination rather than spell it out. But there's like a picture that I'll show, not of me wearing it, but just have a look at like the front side of it and see if you can have a guess about what I'm talking about. Anyway, back to more PG things to talk about. I got the yarn back, obviously. So I frogged it all and created these like cakes of yarn. This is Life in the Long Grass and it's Aran weight. and the colour is called Viking. I'm pretty sure it's called Viking anyway. I have it in my head that it's called Viking, but I've like long since lost the tag for this. And I was looking it up on Ravelry to see what the meterage is, what the yardage is, and to see how much I've got. I forgot that actually, you'll see if I did put that picture up, you'll see that I had like a little top with the shorts. So I actually must have had like 4-ish skeins of it, and I made another sort of little bandeau style top with like tiny little spaghetti straps with like this kind of like lace design around the bottom. That was a test knit that I did that was like a made to measure test knit. I still really like that top. I kind of have a little bit of problems with it. Again, I tend to wear it over things. But the reason that I'm talking about this yarn and talking about that top and talking about the butt shorts is that what was quite nice was that I would have like a bit of a matching set with like a top and a pair of shorts. So I've been racking my brains with what I'm going to do with this sort of 2.5 skeins of unraveled yarn that I have. And my conclusion, which I'm really excited about, is that I'm going to knit skirt number 1 by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I don't think I've done a My Favourite Things pattern ever before. This will be my first one. And this is like obviously quite a basic pattern, but it felt, when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is what it's going to be, because then I get to have a set still rather than shorts and top. It'll be skirt and top. And also I have this little vision of me wearing like a shirt and then the knitted top over and then the shirt over the skirt as a kind of like little preppy 2-piece. So that vision has infected my brain and taken over, and I will be, I think, incapable of living without fulfilling that dream. I have been kind of making like little bargains with myself about when I get to cast that on, because I really want to cast it on. I was going to do it last night, and then I thought, no, I'll like come on here, I'll talk about the plans, and then I'll cast on as like a little treat once I get through another bunch of little admin-y style tasks that I need to do. But that will be a reward for maybe like the end of the day. I get to start on that. It also, I think, has a folded, not hem, folded waistband. So again, I like what I like. I know what I like, and I like what I like. In terms of buying new yarn, I am not going to be buying any more variegated yarn. I am kind of sick of it. A lot of it is in my stash, and I keep like getting excited about it and then thinking I'm going to make something out of it and then not really making stuff out of it. And I need to challenge myself to buy like pure solid colours, but colours that I just really like, instead of ones with like beautiful flecks in it and just getting absorbed by the concept of how it looks on the skein, forgetting that I actually hate how it looks when it's knit up. But I think it, like, this is at least kind of subtle enough that even when it's done in the stocking stitch, I think it doesn't have some of the features of variegated yarn that I really don't like, where it's like really stripy. Anyway, that's all today, folks. I thought this would be quite a quick one, and then I've surprised myself with how much I actually had to talk about. I really appreciate you spending the time with me, as always. It's a pleasure, it's a joy. You might notice that I'm trying to be a little bit more consistent about turning up and talking about things, and that's because I find that I do have lots of thoughts and lots of passion for stuff, especially as I'm making it, and trying to resist the idea that something needs to be finished for it to be interesting. So hope that you agree with that idea. I think it's very topical. Everyone's talking about like Finish It February is obviously a thing that kind of happens every year. And the concept of finished is one that really interests me because I don't believe in it to an extent. I don't think things are ever really finished. I think even when you get like closure on something, whether it's in the making world or in life, it constantly like changes and evolves. And we know that even memories that don't change, like even memories that aren't added to, even relationships that you have with people, every time you reconstruct that memory, you kind of change it in light of who you are in the moment. And I think the same is true for our crafts and for the things that we make and for our clothing. Every time you wear it slightly differently, even if it's the same outfit that you've done many times before. So yeah, hot take. I don't believe in the idea of finishing anything. I just believe in the idea of making it right for now. And then somebody in the future, yourself, somebody else, will make it right for then. And with that, it's been a great pleasure. I hope that you have a great rest of your day lined up. I, sadly, tragically, because it's absolutely hoofing it down rain-wise, have to go and do a long run. So wish me luck with that. And my reward will be to cast on my skirt number 1. Adios.